first, I read with a mixture of alarm, anger, and above all, a profound sense of sadness the story in the 9 newspapers the other day about something called eco-anxiety, which afflicts apparently 2 out of 5 young Australians who, says the article, are hesitant about having their own kids because of climate change. The article went on, a survey has found 25% of young Australians under 18 are extremely worried about climate change. A further 28% very worried. So that's over half our kids are either extremely or very worried about climate change. A further 29% moderately worried. And only, wait for it, only 6% of Australian kids under 18 are not worried at all. Well, my heartiest congratulations to those 6%. But let me be very clear. These figures are a national disgrace. To rob children of their joyful, optimistic innocence, to rob them of hope for a bright future, to rob them of their dreams and their ambitions, to fill their minds and hearts with fear, apprehension, and foreboding is, as far as I am concerned, nothing short of child abuse. I won't bore you now with a lengthy rant about the fraudulent apocalyptic scenarios and why and how they are disputed, because I don't need to. The commentary on the IPCC's worst-case predictions pointed out that those scenarios, the ones that the doomsday mongers peddle to our children, are extremely unlikely to occur. Take the doom-mongering about rising sea levels, for example. As Chris Mitchell, who I'll be chatting to in a second, reminds us in his excellent column this morning, the ABC's own fact-checking unit concluded in December 2018 that most Pacific Island atolls are not sinking. Many were actually rising. Yet in the past couple of weeks, we have seen the 2 most senior political leaders in our country making unverifiable and contestable claims about Pacific Islands and climate change and stating them as fact. And who can forget this utterly scandalous cover of Time magazine featuring the Secretary-General of the United Nations wandering knee-deep into the shallow waters under a headline, "Our Sinking Planet." No wonder our children are suffering from eco-anxiety. The 9 newspapers article goes on to quote an Australian psychologist who says anxiety is a natural reaction to climate change, and she expects it to increase among young people and all age groups. Quote, "It is normal to feel anxious when the science is clear that on current trends, Australia and the world will be far less habitable and that the window to stop this is rapidly closing." That's a psychologist. But even the BBC has pointed out that the worst-case scenarios are the least likely to actually occur. But instead, for a generation now, we have fed our kids a steady diet of doom like this.
The World Trade Center Memorial would be underwater. Think of the impact of a couple 100,000 refugees, and then imagine 100 million. We have to act together to solve this global crisis. Our ability to live is what is at stake.
What hope have we as a nation if our next generation are already crippled with fear about these terrifying threats of the climate change alarmists? The 9 newspaper article also quotes the UNICEF Australia chief who claims, "Young people have seen this, they've experienced it, and because of their experiences with drought and bushfires and floods, they can see if we don't do something specifically about our carbon emissions, this will keep happening." I've got news. I've got news for the UNICEF lady. Droughts, bushfires and floods have always happened in Australia and will always carry on happening. Just ask Dorothy McKellar. Then comes, wait for it, the psychologist's solution to eco-anxiety. So there's the problem, eco-anxiety. Here's the solution, political activism. In other words, join the Greens. Quote, "Activism is a great way to reduce anxiety and improve mood." Oh, really? You mean like this, do you?
People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
But I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. My name is Greta Thunberg. I'm 16 years old. I come from Sweden, and I want you to panic. I want you to act as if the house was on fire.
House is on fire now. No wonder kids are eco-anxious. Yet how many of them were then shown this exchange when Greta Thunberg was asked to testify under oath about her claims?
Ms. Thunberg, thank you for your involvement here today. I commend you for your willingness to testify and get involved with public policy. In the past, when you're talking about climate change, you have said, quote, "I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day." Is there what particular study or scientific report did you read that made you come to this conclusion?
Thank you for the question. First of all, let me just clear that those are metaphors. In speeches, you often use metaphors. Of course, I don't mean literally that I want people to panic. So there was no scientific study that made me come to that conclusion.
So, no scientific study then. It was all just a metaphor. I wonder how many Aussie kids under 18 would even know what a metaphor is, thanks to our education system. And then we got this little gem from Greta.
Permissible on CO2 emissions, in your opinion? What actual amount do you think is permissible?
Well, I mean, of course, there is no magic amount that says that this is an okay amount. The science doesn't really work that way. But of course, we can say that it is the higher the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere is, the bigger the risks are going to be. So, I mean, you can't say that there's one amount that is acceptable and not. Of course, there's not one magic tipping point where everything is beyond saving and so on, but rather we should try to keep it as low as possible.
Keep it as low as possible. So there you have it, from the world's chief purveyor of climate fear porn and eco-anxiety. We should just try to keep our emissions as low as possible. Excellent advice, which is precisely what Australia and the Australian governments have been doing with far greater success than most other countries for at least the last decade or so. So let me repeat to all you teachers, to the ABC, to the politicians and figures of authority who peddle climate extremism, fear porn to our young kids: how dare you?